Frank Pearson stood silently by the broad, reinforced window of the Earth Embassy, his eyes fixed on the endless ocean of stars that stretched beyond the transparent pane. Each pinprick of light represented a world, a civilization, a people, and yet, in this vast galactic stage, humanity remained little more than a tolerated curiosity. It had been 3 long years since Earth had been granted observer status within the Galactic Council. 3 grueling, politically charged years filled with forced smiles, hollow diplomacy, and the subtle humiliation of being treated as irrelevant. Through countless meetings, Earth had been seen but never truly heard. A soft chime preceded the whoosh of the door sliding open. Olivia Grant stepped inside briskly, her footsteps echoing slightly on the polished floor. Clutched in her hands was a datapad loaded with today's agenda. Her white lab coat bore the Earth insignia and marked her as the lead scientific liaison, a role that, in theory, should have granted her respect among the Council's more technologically advanced species. In practice, she was often dismissed as though her degrees in astroengineering and xenobiology were mere certificates of curiosity. "Ambassador," Olivia said, her voice steady despite the tension that filled the embassy that morning. "The council session is scheduled to begin in 20 minutes. Frank turned away from the window slowly, his diplomatic uniform catching the overhead light as he adjusted the collar. His posture was composed, every movement measured. "Thank you. Olivia, are there any last-minute changes I should be aware of?" "Yes," she replied, tapping the screen. "The Valdorians have requested extended speaking time. Officially, it's about mining rights in the Outer Rim. Unofficially, my contacts say it's something else entirely." Frank let out a long breath through his nose. The Valdorians' tall, blue-skinned, 4-armed imperialists had never hidden their contempt for humanity. Their empire, spanning a dozen star systems, dwarfed Earth's modest reach. Since first contact, they'd treated Earth's delegation with thinly veiled scorn, seeing the human race as an upstart species playing at diplomacy. "Of course they have," Frank murmured, keeping his voice calm. "Then we proceed with the usual approach. Maintain composure. Courtesy and protocol above all else." The door opened once more, and Commander Senaed Sign Murphy strode in with military precision. Her Earth Force uniform was immaculate, the silver piping on her shoulders gleaming under the embassy's lights. She came to a halt and offered a respectful nod. "Sir," she reported, "security protocols have been reviewed and reinforced. However, our request to bring even a minimal personal security detail was denied again. Council guards cite neutrality clauses." Frank nodded, unsurprised. "Another violation of Section 12 in the Observer Agreement. Add it to the record." "The list is getting long, sir," Sign muttered. "Good," Frank replied. "Let them pile up. We document everything." With the mood set, the 3 humans exited the embassy and began the long walk through the central corridor of the council station, a sprawling space hub suspended at a nexus of major trade lanes. Its architecture was vast and alien, columns of glowing light rising from the floors like frozen auroras. As they moved, representatives of other species stepped aside. Some did so out of protocol. Others did it with sneers or glances of derision. "Ambassador Pearson," came a grating, rasp-like voice. Frank turned to see High Counselor Vextral of the Zentari approaching. The alien's gray, ridged skin shimmered faintly under the overhead light, and his multifaceted eyes seemed to twitch independently. "I trust," Vextral said with mock graciousness, "that you are prepared to observe today's proceedings. The subjects at hand may exceed your people's understanding." Frank smiled with practiced ease. "High Counselor, it is always a pleasure to learn from the wisdom of the Council. We look forward to observing with great attentiveness." The Centauri diplomat let out a sound that was somewhere between a hiss and a derisive snort before continuing on his way. Once he was out of earshot, Sign leaned in. "How do you do that?" Frank raised an eyebrow. "Do what?" "Keep smiling while they talk to us like we're children." He didn't miss a beat. Protocol, courtesy, and a lifetime of practice. Earth's mandate is clear. We represent our entire species. We don't get to lose our temper. At last, they entered the vast council chamber. Tiered semicircles of dignitaries lined the grand room, representatives of 27 advanced civilizations seated according to hierarchy. The humans, still only observers, were seated at the far rear, behind a transparent barrier that reminded them, and everyone else, that they didn't yet belong. As they took their seats, a murmur rippled through the chamber. Olivia activated her data pad. Sign scanned the room with a trained eye. Frank folded his hands. "The council acknowledges the presence of the Earth delegation," Vextral announced, fulfilling the barest requirement of protocol. Frank nodded. In acknowledgement, the session began with ceremonial pleasantries, followed by status reports on trade, stellar border disputes, and technological regulation frameworks. Humanity's presence went ignored. When Frank raised the small blue flag requesting permission to speak standard observer, protocol, no one acknowledged it. Then, Vextral's voice rang out again. "The Council recognizes the Valdorian Empire." A Valdorian diplomat rose. There, body tall and shimmering blue, unfolded like a predatory flower. 4 arms extended ceremonially. "The Empire wishes to propose a protective oversight colony on the 4th planet of the Sol system, Mars." Frank felt the temperature in the chamber drop. Olivia froze, her fingers hovering above her screen. Sign clenched her jaw. Frank raised his flag again, this time higher. "The motion will be reviewed," Vextral stated with casual indifference. "Arguments will be heard tomorrow." The Valdorians weren't simply insulting Earth anymore. They were making a play for it. That night, Frank barely slept. He remained in the embassy's war room, poring over galactic charter articles, preparing rebuttals, collecting scientific evidence of human claims to Mars. The next day, he arrived early, flanked by Olivia and Sign. "Remember," he said under his breath, "protocol and courtesy. No matter what happens, we must not be what they expect us to be." The chamber filled quickly. Curious glances flickered toward the human delegation. The Valdorians arrived last, resplendent and confident. High Counselor Vextral gavelled the session to order. "We resume the matter of the Valdorian proposal." Ambassador Kreltox of the Valdorian Empire stepped forward. "Esteemed Council," he began, "we bring this proposal out of concern for galactic order. The humans are advancing recklessly. Their history is war, their ethics underdeveloped. Mars is wasted. We offer stewardship." Frank raised his flag. Ignored again, Kreltox continued, "We will commence our oversight colony within 30 days. Our ships are en route." Gasps and murmurs spread like wildfire. Then, unexpectedly, Admiral Jorax of the Arcturan Federation, previously neutral, spoke up. "The Earth delegate requests to speak," he said clearly. Vextral hesitated, then nodded. Frank walked to the central platform, every eye locked on him. He placed his datapad on the console. "The Valdorian proposal violates 17 sections of the Galactic Charter," he began. "Mars is sovereign territory of a developing system, our system. Terraforming has begun. Research bases have been established. Colonization plans are underway." Kreltox laughed dismissively. "They've sent a few robots in tents. That is not colonization." Frank pressed on. "Consent is a foundational principle of the Council. Earth does not grant it." "Consent," Kreltox interrupted, "is not required for oversight. Oversight is not partnership. Laughter echoed again. I request arbitration under Section 5 of the Observer Agreement, Frank said. Denied, Vextrol snapped. Proceed to preliminary vote. Frank returned to his seat. Sign leaned in. Sir, this is sanctioned theft. I know, Frank whispered. Get Earth Command online. The vote was swift. 22 in favor, 3 opposed. 2 abstained. Mars was being stolen. Legally. Back at the embassy, silence fell over the room. Then Diane Wells entered, pale. They're not waiting for approval, she said. Their colony ships are already en route. They'll land within the week. Frank turned toward the secure line. Get me the president. Minutes later, President Allison Crawford's face appeared. Frank gave the full report. When he finished, she didn't hesitate. Ambassador Pearson, she said, her voice like steel, you and your team have endured 3 years of silence. Insults and dismissals with grace. Yes, Madam President. It's time that ends. Effective immediately. I am authorizing the suspension of Protocol Courtesy Code designation. Enough is enough. Frank felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Understood. Madame President, Ambassador, to be absolutely clear, this is not authorization for hostilities, this is permission. To show the Council who we really are and what we're truly capable of. The mask comes off, but we remain committed to peaceful solutions if possible, yes. Madame President, after Feckle ended, Frank turned to his team. Well, you heard the President. Protocol Courtesy has been suspended. Scene almost smiled. What's our next move, Sir? Diane. Indeed, everything you've gathered on the Valderans, especially their communications about their real intentions for Mars. Olivia, prepare a complete technical package on our actual technological capabilities. Scene. Contact our security teams tomorrow. Will be different as his team dispersed to their tasks. Frank returned to the window overlooking the vast council station. In other parts of the station, various alien representatives were likely celebrating their victory over the naive humans or placing bets on how quickly Earth would surrender Mars to the Valderans. Little did they know that tomorrow they would meet the real humanity for the first time. The polite differential humans who had patiently endured 3 years off disrespect were about to show the galaxy what happened when humanity's Cortis mode switched off. Frank allowed himself a small, genuine smile. Tomorrow would indeed be interesting. The next morning, Frank dressed in his diplomatic uniform as usual. However, something was different. He did not practice his courteous smile in the mirror. He did not rehearse polite phrases and diplomatic responses today. Would simply be Frank Pearson representing Earth as himself. Sean and Olivia met him in the embassy hallway. They too seemed different, standing straighter, eyes more focused. The council session begins in 30 minutes. Scene said the Valdorian motion for Mars is third in the agenda. Frank nodded. And our preparations. Already Olivia Confermedian has the data package prepared to broadcast to all council screens. Simultaneously, we can activate it on your signal. Good. Frank began walking toward the council chamber. Remember, we're not looking for a fight, we're simply done pretending to be less than we are. The council chamber was more crowded than usual. Word had spread about the Mars colonization plan, and many wanted to witness the humans' reaction. Some species likely came to enjoy watching Earth's representatives squirm and ultimately accept their fate. Frank took his seat in the observer section. He noticed several council members glancing his way, perhaps expecting to see despair or resignation. Instead, they saw only calm determination. The session began with routine matters. Frank paid little attention until Vexrol announced, "We know move to the Valdorian proposal regarding protective oversight of the Sol system planet designated Mars." Ambassadorcals took the central platform. Esteemed Council, we have prepared a detailed timeline for our Mars operation. First phase will begin with the arrival of our advanced ships, which are already en route. Frank stood up without raising his blue flag. Observer, you have not been recognized. Vextrol said sharply. Soon Your seat. Frank ignored him and walked calmly toward the central platform. Security, remove the HumaniTRISing. Ordered the Council's security forces, large reptilian beings. Move it toward Frank. Scene stepped into their path. I wouldn't. Scene said quietly. Security forces hesitated, confused by this new assertive human behavior. Frank reached the platform where Krell stood, the Valdorian nearly 2 feet taller than Frank. Looked down with forward contempt. You're out of order, human. Krell said no. Frank replied, his voice carrying throughout the chamber without raising it. It is this council that is out of order. A shocked murmur spread through the chamber. No observer species had ever spoken this way for 3 years. Frank continued, humanity has shown nothing but courtesy and respect to this council. We have followed every rule, accepted every slight, and maintained diplomatic protocol even when it was clear we were being treated unfairly. This is not proper procedure. Vexral began. I am speaking. Frank said, his tone making it clear he would not be interrupted. To everyone's surprise, Vexral fell silent. We came to this council hoping to join a community of civilizations built on mutual respect and cooperation. Instead, we found a system where power alone dictates rights, where less advanced species are treated as resources to be exploited, rather than equals to be welcomed. Frank turned to face the entire council. The Valdorian plan to colonize Mars is not about protection or oversight. It is theft, plain and simple. How dare you? Krell sputtered. Olivia, show them, Frank said calmly. Throughout the chamber, every screen changed to show internal Valdorian communities. Messages discussing the rich mineral deposits on Mars, plans for extraction operations, and calculations of profit margins. None mentioned protection or oversight of humans. These messages were sent between Valdorian officials over the past month. Frank explained their interest is not in humanity's welfare but in Mars resources. Chamber erupted in chaos. Krilltox backed away from Frank, all four hands gesturing frantically. This is only the beginning, Frank said, his voice somehow cutting through the noise. Humanity has been patient. That patience has now run out as the council chamber descended into disorder. Vextral struck his ceremonial staff against the floor 3 times. The loud sound gradually brought the room back to order. This is a Nutrich. Krell hissed, the humans have clearly falsified THESA communications. Frank remained calm. Diane, please show the authentication codes. The screens changed to display complex verification data. Olivia stepped forward. These messages carry quantum authentication markers specific to Valdorian diplomatic channels. She explained they cannot be faked. Every species on this council knows this. Several council members began to whisper among themselves. The Valdorian evidence was damning. Furthermore, Frank continued, the Valdorian interest in Mars is not unique. We have evidence of similar plans from other council members. Screens changed again, now showing communications from 5 other species discussing Earth's resources, military capabilities, and potential colonization strategies. For 3 years, while we play the role of grateful observers, humanity has been monitoring your communications, because we wanted to spy, but because we needed to protect ourselves. A Zenturi representative stood up. This is illegal surveillance. Observer species are forbidden from intelligence gathering, and yet Frank replied, full council members are permitted to discuss the colonization of observer worlds without their knowledge. Is that fair? Noon answered. The double standard was too obvious. Humanity came here in good faith. Frank said, we showed you respect, we followed your rules, we endured your contempt, and all the while many of you were planning to carve up our solar system like a prize. Frank walked around the central platform, making eye contact with representatives from each major species. Did you think we were naive? Did you believe we wouldn't take precautions? Humanity has survived thousands of years of our own conflicts. We've learned to hope for peace while preparing for betrayal. Diane activated another data package. The screens now showed evidence of council members mocking humans in private, calling them primitives and easy targets. This is how you spoke about us behind closed doors, Frank said. While we're extending friendship, you were planning exploitation. The Araran Admiral Zorak stood unlike the others. He didn't seem angry or defensive. Ambassador Pearson speaks truth that needed saying, the Arcturian declared. I have watched this council treat humans unfairly since their arrival. Perhaps it is time for honesty. A few other representatives nodded in agreement, but most looked outraged or embarrassed. Vextroll finally found his voice again. These accusations, while troubling, if true, do not change council procedure. The Valdorian motion, is based on lies. Frank interrupted, and we have not finished presenting our evidence. Olivia activated the next set of data. The screen showed a three-dimensional map of the solar system with a flashing red dot near the orbit of Neptune. This, Frank explained, is the current position of the Valdorian fleet heading toward Mars. They launched before even bringing their proposal to the council. They never intended to wait for approval. Krelltox backed away from platform. This is within our rights. As a superior civilization, humans cannot be trusted with the resources of Mars, and that, Frank said, his voice hardening. For the first time is where you are profoundly mistaken. Diane, show them. Thephanol data package. The screens shown last time. Now they displayed a different map of the solar system. This one showing dozens of previously undetected human defense platforms surrounding each planet with particularly heavy concentrations around Mars. As we speak, Frank said, Earth Defense Command has activated our outer system protection grid. The Voron fleet has been immobilized by targeted EMP weapons. No ships were damaged, no lives were lost, but they will not move another inch toward Mars. The council chamber fell completely silent as the implications became clear. Humanity was not as defenseless as everyone had believed. Vex Troll's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. Ambassador Pearson, are you claiming that humanity has deployed a military defense system throughout your solar system without informing the council? Yes, Frank said simply, just as the Valdorans deployed their fleet without informing the council. Scene stepped forward to stand beside Frank. While Ambassador Pearson has represented Earth politically, I have overseen our security preparation. Humanity has never been as vulnerable as we appeared to be. The screens Changedagon now showing images of sleek, nearly invisible satellites and defense platforms. Our stealth technology, Scene explained, is generations ahead of detection systems used by council races. We developed it during our own internal conflicts long before we met any of you. Krilltox, now visibly nervous, moved away from the platform. This is a violation of council regulations. Observer species are forbidden from deploying advanced weapons. Actually, Olivia said, stepping forward with a datapad. Section 47 paragraph 3 of the Observer Status Agreement states that observer species may maintain reasonable defensive measures within their home systems. It doesn't specify what constitutes reasonable. You've been deliberately misleading the council about your technological capabilities, accused a representative from the Morgan Collective, a species of insectoid beings. No, Frank replied, we never lied about our capabilities. You simply never assumed we were primitive because it suited your purposes to think so, Commander. Sign touched his communications device. I'm receiving live updates from Earth Defense Command. The Valdorian fleet is being escorted out of our solar system. No damage has been done to their ships. No lives have been lost. The Valdorian ambassador looked ready to explode with rage. This is an act of war the Valdorian Empire will not stand for. This humiliation, Admiral. Zora of the Arcturans laughed, a musical sound that cut through the tension. I believe, Ambassador Krells, that you will find it difficult to declare war over being prevented from stealing another species' planet. Several other council members nodded in agreement. The mood in the chamber was shifting. There is more, Frank said. The screens changed again, now showing a map of council space with hundreds of small dots scattered throughout it. What are we seeing? Vexroll asked, his voice barely audible. For 3 years, Scene explained, while you ignored us and plotted against you, we've been deploying observation platforms throughout council space. They're completely passive, no weapons, just sensors, but they've been monitoring fleet movements, resource exploitation, treaty violations by various council members, the dots on the screen began to pulse with different colors, each representing a different type of activity. The red dots seem continued shell locations where council members have violated the non-interference treaty with press-based flight civilization. Blue dots show illegal resource extraction. The green dots show military buildups in supposedly demilitarized zones. Council members looked at each other in shock and suspicion. Many of them had been caught breaking rules they thought no one would discover, but most importantly, Frank said, his voice gentle but firm. Noticed the yellow dots. Yellow dots appeared around the council station itself and around each major council homeworld. These represent human stealth platforms with defensive capabilities similar to those protecting our solar system. We never wanted to use them. Westall don't, but they exist and they can be activated if needed. The chamber fell completely silent. Even Vextral seemed at a loss for words. Humanity came to this council seeking friendship and cooperation. Frank said, breaking the silence, we still want those things, but we will no longer pretend to be less than we are. In order to make others comfortable, we will no longer accept second-class status or threats to our sovereignty. Frank walked back to the central platform and looked out at the stunned faces of the council members. Noah said calmly, let's discuss the terms of humanity's full membership in this council. For almost an hour after Frank's declaration, the council chamber remained in chaos. Species that had been enemies for centuries now accused each other of various violations shown on the human sensor data. Others demanded emergency sessions to discuss the human revelations. A few simply left the chamber, presumably to contact their homeworlds for instructions. Vextrol finally managed to restore order by declaring a short recess as council members filed out of the chamber. Many glanced at the human delegation with new expressions, some fearful, others respectful, and a few even admiring. Frank, Olivia, Scene, and Diane remained at their seats reviewing data and preparing for what would come next. They're scared, Diane observed quietly. Fear isn't what we want, Frank replied. Respect. As Admiral Jorax approached their section, the tall, slender archer and moved with fluid grace. Ambassador Pearson, I must say this has been the most interesting council session in my 200 years of service. Shresaid. Frank smiled. I hope it's also productive, Admiral. I believe it will be. Several delegations are already discussing supporting your bid for full membership, including mine. Thank you, Admiral. May I ask why the Archerians seem less surprised than others by our revelations? Zora made a gesture that seemed equivalent to a human shrug. Perhaps because we bothered to study your history. Any species that survived its own atomic age without extinction must have remarkable adaptability and caution. We suspected you were holding back. After the recess, the council reconvened. Vexrol looked noticeably less confident as he called the session to order. The council will now address the situation regarding Earth's status. Vextral announced, Ambassador Pearson has requested full membership for humanity. Under the circumstances, this request deserves immediate consideration. Frank returned to the central platform. Thank you. High Counselor, humanity proposes the following terms for our integration into the Council. The screens displayed a simple list. First, Earth and all planets in the Sol system are recognized as sovereign human territories. Second, humanity receives full voting rights on all council matters. Third, a formal apology from the Valdorian Empire for their attempted colonization of Mars. Keltok still present but subdued. Heist softly. Fourth, Frank continued, humanity will share certain technological evidence with the Council in exchange for equal access to Council scientific data. And fifth, all species that have been planning resource exploitation in our system will formally renounce those plans. Various council members began consulting with their aides and with each other. Some seemed ready to agree immediately, while others appeared hesitant. A representative of the Council, Morian Collective, rose, and if we refuse these terms, Frank's expression remained. Humanity will withdraw from the Council and activate our defensive network. We would prefer friendship but will accept isolation if necessary. The implied threat hung in the air. I move to accept the human terms, Admiral Jorah said, breaking the tense silence. Grixian Dominion seconds, called another voice. To everyone's surprise, it came from a species that had previously shown little interest in humans. Their representative from the Morgan Collective stood again. This is coercion. Humans are threatening us with their hidden weapons. No, Frank said firmly. We are offering you a choice between treating us as equals or not dealing with us at all. That's not a threat, it's diplomacy. Vextrol consulted briefly with other senior council members before speaking. This matter is too important for an immediate vote. The council will take 2 standard weeks to consider Thehuman terms. In the meantime, the Valdorian action against Mars is officially suspended. Frank nodded. Thetis acceptable. However, I must emphasize that our defensive measures will remain active during this period. As the session ended, various representatives approached Frank, some offering support, others seeking private assurances. A few even apologized for past dismissals. Wellseen said quietly as they observed the changing attitudes around them, it seems the council is finally taking humanity seriously. Yes, Frank replied. Amazing what happens when courtesy becomes a choice rather than a necessity. 2 weeks passed quickly. The council station buzzed with activity. A species that had ignored humans now sought meetings with Frank and his team. Frey representatives for partnerships. Military officials requested information about human stealth technology. Scientists proposed joint research projects. Frank handled it all with the same calm demeanor he had always shown, but now without the forced smile and excessive politeness. He was simply himself, direct, fair, and focused on humanity's interests. On the final day of deliberation, the council chamber was filled to capacity. Even species that rarely attended sessions had sent representatives to witness the vote on humanity's status. Frank sat with his team, reviewing last-minute data. No matter what happens today, he told them, you've all served Earth with distinction. Vextrol called the session to order. The Zener High Counselor looked different today, more cautious, less dismissive. The Council will now vote on the petition for humanity to receive full membership with the terms proposed by Ambassador Pearson. Vextrol announced the voting process was simple. Each member's screen will show either approval or rejection. The results would be displayed on the main chamber screen for all to see. Voting begins. Now Vextrol declared. The chamber fell silent as council members made their choices. Frank watched calmly, his expression revealing nothing. After 5 minutes, Vextrol spoke again. Voting is now closed. The results will be displayed. The main screen lit up with the final tally: 25 approvals, 1 rejection, and 1 abstention. A murmur of surprise spread through the chamber. Even Frank seemed momentarily taken back by the overwhelming support. The council has spoken, Vextrol announced. Earth is granted full membership with all rights and responsibilities therein. The terms proposed by Ambassador Pearson area kept it in full. Frank stood and bowed slightly to the council. Humanity thanks you for this decision. We look forward to working together as equals. The formal session ended, but most council members remained in the chamber, forming small groups for discussion. Frank was approached by Vextrol himself. Ambassador Pearson, the Zentari, said, his voice lower than usual. Might I have a private word? Frank nodded and followed Vextrol to a small side chamber. Once alone, the High Counselor seemed to deflate slightly, his formal posture relaxing. I have a question that has been troubling me, Vextrol said. Why did humanity maintain facade of excessive politeness for so long? You clearly had the power. Toadman respect from the beginning. Frank considered his answer carefully. High Counselor, humans have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. It means that true strength doesn't need tone-outs itself constantly, but the disrespect you endured was difficult, Frank admitted, but humanity genuinely wanted peaceful integration. We preferred to earn respect through patience and diplomacy rather than through shows of force, and yet in the end, it was force that gained you respect. Vextrol observed. Frank shook his head. No, it was truth. Simply stop pretending to be less than. We are vexed. Troll was silent for a moment. I believe I have misjudged your species. Ambassador, that's understandable, Frank replied. We've misjudged each other, but now we have a chance to start again with honesty between us as they return to the main chamber. Frank saw his team speaking with various council members. Olivia was deep in discussion with a group of scientists. Scene was comparing notes with military officers from 3 different species. Diane was organizing new communication protocols with other diplomatic staff. Frank said to Vexrol, humanity still values courtesy. It was never our weakness. It was a choice we extended to those we hoped would become friends. And now? Vexrol asked. Frank smiled a genuine smile without the diplomatic polish. Now we can courteous because we want to be, not because we have to be. That's the difference. As they rejoined the gathering, Frank felt a sense of satisfaction. Humanity had finally found its true place in the galaxy. Not through endless accommodation, but through the strength to be authentically themselves.